What is up, everyone? Prometheus here. Today I'm going to be talking about the recent Studio Ghibli's most recent movie, The Boy and the Heron, or known as How Do You Live in Japan. But, so if you read the thumbnail of the video, I said, this video I'm going to be talking about why I personally think The Boy and the Heron is, in fact, the greatest animated movie of all time. Now, many would think of the rest animated movies of all time would consider Spirited Away to be the greatest Ghibli film and greatest animated film of all time. And while Spirited Away is still one of my top 3 Ghibli movies and a 10 out of 10 masterpiece and one of only 5 animated Ghibli animated movies I would give a 10 out of 10, I don't think it's quite as great. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still a masterpiece. It's 10 out of 10. One of my top 3 animated films of all time and one of the top 3 of the studio. But I do believe there are 2 movies by the studio that are better than it. Slightly better. That are a bit better. I feel are a bit stronger. Don't get me wrong, Spirited Away is already a great film, but 2 of these films are greater. Those 2 films being The Boy and the Heron and The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, which are both absolutely transcendent films. Which, yeah, Spirited Away is also a transcendent movie, but these ones transcend even higher than what Spirited Away set for them. So, the 5 Ghibli films and the 5 animated films I've given a 10 out of 10 are Princess Mononoke, Grave of the Fireflies, and of course Spirited Away, Tales of Princess Kaguya, and of course Boy and the Heron. Now, of those 5 films, I think Boy of the Heron is the best. And because it's the best, it is not only Miyazaki's best film, not only the best film of the studio, but the best animated movie of all time, and to a certain extent, one of my top 30 movies of all time, and my personal favorite animated movie of all time. I said of all time a lot. But also, I thought about it a bit more, and this could be a strong contender for not only the best Ghibli film, but possibly the best film of the 2020s so far. Like I said, RRR and Dune Part 2 were strong contenders, but this one is also a strong contender. So it could possibly be the best. It was my movie of the year last year. Like, don't get me wrong, Oppenheimer was amazing, but Boy and the Heron I felt was like the highest form of art we could get from the animation industry. And I'm going to be talking about that today. So, if you don't know how Miyazaki is, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, but basically, he's the best he's one of the best directors in the industry right now, one of the best of all time, as well as the greatest animator of all time. Yes, better than Walt Disney, in fact, because he values art. He values his form of art is unmatched and just so different from all other, like, no other animators can replicate what Miyazaki has done. And with The Boy and the Heron, it showed, like, it was kind of like a culmination of everything he had done in the past, all in one magnificent movie. It's his most personal movie. So here's what I want to talk about. A lot of this appreciation and stuff that I've opened my eyes up to this film kind of came from the YouTuber, another film YouTuber. His name is Shafrilla's Productions, but basically he did on his top 15 movies of 2023, he had this in number 2, saying it's the best Ghibli film best Miyazaki film since Spirited Away, and I do agree with him, but I don't think it's just the best Ghibli film since Spirited Away. I just think it's the best Ghibli film, period. Now, if you haven't checked out his channel, he's great. He does a lot of analyses, reviews, and critiques of TV shows, mostly animated movies, and sometimes video games. But yeah, he kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different aspects of this movie and how some of the stuff represents, what some of the stuff in the movie represents and stuff. So if you like movie channels and stuff, check out Shafrilla's Productions. He's honestly one of the best when it comes to, like, animated movies. So Shafrilla's, if you are watching this, a shout out to you for giving me a lot of, like, inspiration to start doing film videos on this channel. Yes, his film videos kind of inspired me to do film reviews on my channel as well. So thanks shout out to you. Check out his channel. It's really funny channel, and he makes some pretty good points. He did kind of open my eyes up to some of the problems with Howl's Moving Castle, which I don't think it's a terrible movie by no means. But yeah, it kind of opened my eyes up and definitely saw it as one of Miyazaki's weaker films. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still like a 7, maybe 8 out of 10. But a lot of the plot points and structure of the film do kind of hold it back. Yeah, it did open my eyes up to that. But, yeah, anyways, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about here is kind of stuff I heard about the movie, and when watching some of the people analyses of this movie, I hear people talking about why it's not just a great film because of just the artistry, but also how personal, how it represents Miyazaki and stuff. And I absolutely agree. It's absolutely magnificent. So the main character of this movie, Mahito, kind of represents Miyazaki. He's the son of a airplane parts manufacturer like Miyazaki, who lost his mother during, or no, I don't know if Miyazaki lost his mother during World War II to a fire like Mahito did, but he's the thing that kind of shows is both of them are similar in how they're two people, son of a raised in World War II, and son of an airplane parts manufacturer. So, yeah, his mother is killed in a hospital fire during World War II, and he deals with grief. He meets his new mother in the film, and it seems he's pretty depressed, miserable, moving to this new town and not feeling right at home with his new mother. But what I want to represent, what really truly represents Miyazaki in this film is kind of, so the Mahito represents Miyazaki as a child when he was younger, but then the granduncle in this film who created this world, created this great magical fantasy world like within the tower, kind of represents Miyazaki growing older, and this old man has to pass on. Eventually he has to let let go of this world and pass on and give the world a new person to kind of create. He hands over the building blocks for someone else to create a new world. I'm kind of being a bit, sorry, I'm kind of running out of words, but basically the old man right here represents Miyazaki, whereas the boy kind of represents when he was younger, or more so the new generation, because Miyazaki is getting old and he will eventually pass away, so he won't be making animated movies forever. So eventually he has to pass on the reins of his animation studio, like the reins of his animation, his craft, to someone else. So the old man growing older, eventually having to pass on the blocks to someone else to create the world, represents how Miyazaki's craft, his artistry, he can't hold on to it forever because eventually he's going to grow old and pass away. So he has to pass that on to the studio, and no one will ever recreate. There will never be another Miyazaki after Miyazaki's passing, and no one can ever recreate it. So if there's a bit of a spoiler here, but in the end, when the Parakeet King stacks the blocks and they fall over, kind of represents how someone tries to recreate Miyazaki's work, but then failing, because no one can ever try and imitate him, because his style is distinct, his artistry, it's different, and no one can ever recreate that. And a just overall message of grief, of having to move on, because the message of grief and having to move on in this movie is just absolutely magnificent. But that's enough talking about the kind of the representation of this film and how this represents Miyazaki and stuff. Now on to the film itself. So this film has some of the best animation in all of Ghibli. Like, it starts out, the first, like, nearly hour of this film is actually never, not, it doesn't start off, like, the first few minutes isn't him going to this fantasy world. Actually, we spend a lot of time in the real world, him coming to this new town, meeting his mother, and just kind of going with along with life, with a bit of fantasy thrown in with the heron and that scene with the frogs. But it's overall just pretty. It's just normal life, and a bit. It's really touching. Him finding the book from his mother and crying. It's a really just the first 40 minutes of the film are great, but then the film eventually he goes into the tower and he goes into the world of the granduncle. I think I called it grandfather. I don't know, granduncle, but he descends into the world that he had created, and it followed by multiple different events of him exploring this world, meeting younger versions of his mother and that old lady Kiriko, I think, and then eventually having to like find the granduncle and him trying to inherit the building blocks of that world. But basically it's kind of like Spirited Away in how they explore this world and eventually have to find a way out. He goes into this fantasy world to find his stepmother who had went here, and eventually he does, and they make it out. But that's just kind of a simplified version of what happens. There's so many different layers to this movie, the messages, the just story structure. It's complex. It's the main villains of this movie. Like, this movie is still filled with all the weird whimsical fantasy aspects you would find in a Ghibli film. Like, the sort of main villain, like, there's no real like evil characters in this film. Like, even the main villain, the Parakeet King, isn't really that evil. He's more so just a angry king who wants his people to have like their own world he can rule over. He's not really an evil guy, more so just I guess he is the villain, but he's not like much. He's not a threat. He only appears near the end of the film, but he makes a good point about him being able to rule, him and the parakeets being able to rule the world on their own. So he isn't really a truly evil villain, more so just not much, just kind of just a small antagonist, nothing much, but there's still all that the magic of the fantasy worlds created by Ghibli. Like there's giant man-eating parakeets. That sounds evil, but they're just, I don't think they're fully evil. They're just, oh, maybe well, it sounds kind of evil what they do, but anyways, there's giant man-eating parakeets. There's small, like, white balls that are the unborn souls of people eventually having to make their way up to the real world and be born. Those are magnificent. And there's a great celebrity voice cast for the English dub, but I watched the Japanese dubbing in theaters because I respect the original version, and I'll watch the dubbed version when it comes to Netflix. But really, what this film, it's still filled with all the magical stuff, but at the same time, it's also very different in how it's just realistic in the first half. Its themes are different. Like, it's still absolute magic, don't get me wrong, but this is still a very personal movie. Like, another thing, the score for this movie, the musical score by Joe Hisaishi, it's not all like epic or grand like all the other ones. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the grand and magical songs from the previous movies. Like, Legend of Chaka is one of my favorite movie themes of all time. The theme songs to other movies, like all the theme songs in the other Ghibli films are great, but this film, the music in it by Joe Hisaishi is a lot more just simple and calm and never really grand or epic like the other ones, because this isn't a story about an epic quest. This is more so just a personal tale about humanity, about just learning to move on. And I think Joe Hisaishi's score for this film perfectly fits that. Like, this film's score hit me differently than any other movie in the Ghibli canon. Like, it's still like it's not as grand or epic, but it's still honestly an amazing score. And what it represents, it perfectly fits the theme of this movie, and it's still one of the best Ghibli scores. An amazing, like Joe Hisaishi totally understood how to make this film score. He made it calm and simplistic to kind of represent the more personal journey rather than an epic journey. That's what this film is. It's not an epic journey like in the other films. It's a personal journey for the main character and kind of for Miyazaki as well. Like, this isn't going to be his last film, though it would be a great. It definitely would make for a great final film, but it's not going to be his last film. He still has a film or two left in him before he eventually has to retire or sadly pass away, because he's growing older, and eventually his son is probably going to have to follow in his footsteps. And we all know Goro Miyazaki. He's only made one good film, but he made the only two bad films by Studio Ghibli, those being Earwig and the Witch and Tales from Earthsea, which are god-awful movies. I mean, he did show some good potential with Up from Poppy Hill, which is a pretty good film, but he's gonna have to learn from kind of the mistakes he made in the past with those films and try and live up to his father's legacy. But at the same time, he can never recreate what his father did, what his style. So he has to try and make what he needs to focus on is making like improving upon the previous films he did, and try and make good, like replicate what he did with From Poppy Hill, which is great. There's other Ghibli film directors, I think, or maybe not, I don't know, but they will never be able to recreate what Miyazaki did. And The Boy and the Heron shows that the truest form of animation, the purest, just pure art that animation can. It displays the every great aspect of it, the animation, the story, and how magnificent that animated films can be. This film absolutely deserved Best Picture. Yes, I think it's better than Across the Spider-Verse. I'm like don't get me wrong, Across the Spider-Verse is great, but like, how do you top a Ghibli film? Like, come on. Anyways, back to what I was saying about the film. Another great aspect is kind of the characters. Like, again, I already talked about Mahito and how he is a great kind of protagonist and how he has to go on a journey. Another great character is his mother, Lady Hime, who he meets when she was younger. And I like how they tie into, like, the times connected. Like, there's different doors to different times, so that connects back to how she was able to go into this fantasy world when she was younger, and at the same time encounters him, because this fantasy world isn't really in time. It exists outside of their world, outside of time, so it can connect to different timelines, and that's kind of how he can meet his mother. And she's a great character. I think the way that she's revealed to be his mother is also done well. So, but another great character is the Heron himself, who he's a pretty creepy character, but at the same time he's actually pretty funny now once you get to know him. He has a large nose. I noticed, I always pointed that out in the trailer, but he's a funny looking character and still captures the kind of the weird, creepy, and magical designs of the Ghibli creatures. And and like, one of my other favorite aspects of this movie is the world that they descend into. Like, they perfectly portray the realism of the real world in World War II Japan and this little town that they settle in. But once they descend into, like, the tower and just kind of once they descend into the tower and find themselves in this completely new world, that's just I think they masterfully kind of display the beauty of what these films worlds portray. Like, there's been many beautiful worlds, like such as the world from Spirited Away, or just I don't know what else I can say about the film. It's more so a it's more so just I'm sorry, but I'm kind of messing up with I should have wrote a script. This is kind of a messy review of the film. I'm just I'm I'm tripping over my words here. So basically, the world of this film is beautiful. I like how that's a lot of the people there are dead, and how it's kind of just a world disconnected from the world, the outside world, and how it was created based on the foundation that the granduncle had created with the building blocks. And he's kind of like the god of this world, the architect, but he has to let it. He's growing old, and he eventually has to let it fall and give someone else the reins of this movie. And it's just beautiful message, the themes of this film, and the world is just absolutely masterful. I liked every aspect of this film, the characters, the hair. Like, also, a thing I need to bring up is the title of this film, The Boy and the Heron. Shafrilla has pointed out that the Japanese title for this film, How Do You Live, was a lot better title for it, so he referred to it as that film. Like, Shafrilla, you're absolutely right. This film, the only real thing the closest thing I can come to a critique of this film has nothing to do with the film itself, more so just the title. I think they should have. Boy and the Heron is a bad title. That's what the film's about. But I think How Do You Live is a lot better title for the film. So I think, like, I'm going to refer to it as How Do You Live, just like Shafrilla's did. But basically, this film just how do you live? That's kind of the question the film asks. And I think it's not only a personal film for Miyazaki, I feel like it's just a really personal film for anyone who watches it, because then it leaves you to reflect, to just think. And I think that is just amazing. Now, I also want to talk about why I think it's better than Spirited Away and Tales of the Princess Kaguya, because those two were originally my top two best animated films of all time, because originally it was number 5, now the original top 5 Ghibli films, my original top 5 Ghibli films was number 5, Nausicaa, number 4, Grave of the Fireflies, number 3, Princess Mononoke, number 2, Spirited Away, number 1, Princess Kaguya. But then this film came along and bumped Kaguya to 2 and Spirited Away to 3. Yes, I put Spirited Away in number 3. Like, don't get me wrong, Spirited Away, again, it's a masterpiece, but I feel these two films kind of fly even higher, a bit higher than that film did. Like, I've seen that film so many times, it's amazing, but this film, it just connected to me. Like, don't get me wrong, Spirited Away, it did connect to me a lot, but this film connected to me a whole lot too. Like, Shafrilla's Productions, in his ranking of the Studio Ghibli movies, which was before the release of Boy and the Heron, he said Tale of the Princess Kaguya was the greatest animated movie of all time, and I do agree, it's a transcendent film. But then Boy and the Heron came, and now it's second. But he talked about how Princess Kaguya, he had it at number 2, yet he called it the best film in the studio, but he had Whisper of the Heart in number 1 because it was his favorite one. And you know what? I respect that he put the one that connected with him the best in number 1, and I think the film, when you're ranking movies, you should really just look into the one that you connected with the best, not the one that everyone's saying is the best. You should, like, this film connected with me the most out of all the Disney, not the Pixar, it connected with me the most out of the entire Ghibli canon. And it just I also think it's objectively the best Ghibli film and the best animated film, the finest animated film of all time. Like, Princess Kaguya, again, it's amazing, still number 2. In fact, my entire top 4 best animated movies of all time consisted of Ghibli films, with number 5 being The Lion King and some other films being in the top 10. And I can make a list soon, but The Boy and the Heron, what makes it the best animated film is how it displays I said this already, but it displays artistry, the art of animation, and it proves to us that animation is not a genre, it is a art form, and it is one of the best forms of film out there. And it displays great characters, a great narrative structure. Like, some people didn't really said that this film doesn't have a plot at all, but nope, they are wrong. This film has an amazing plot line, and the personal and the way it can connect to people, the way the best aspect of this movie is how it portrays its themes and how it connects with people, how personal it can be. That is what makes it the greatest animated movie of all time. It has the strongest themes, the strongest connection is ever made with me, and other people. Like, I absolutely adore this movie. It's my favorite animated movie of all time. It's not only one of my favorite, not only my number one animated film of all time, it is, again, I said this already, it's one of my top 30 movies of all time. And, of course, it is a 10 out of 10 movie. I absolutely just respect this film. I respect Miyazaki. Like, Miyazaki, he's an interesting man. He's an amazing director, an animator. In an interview, he talked about how sometimes he can get mad sometimes. In fact, he gets mad. He said he gets mad more than other people do. And you know what? I can understand. He can be running all this hand-drawn animation, all this work. It can be a bit stressful running a legendary film studio, being its most well-respected and acclaimed animator. It's stressful, and I can see where he's coming from, and I'm happy that he's willing to admit that he can get angry and that he's not perfect. I can respect when a celebrity or a director can admit that. And like the main character of this film, he's not perfect. He's like Miyazaki. None of the characters in this film are really perfect. Like, Miyazaki's not a perfect man. No one is perfect. I'm not perfect. Do you think I'm going to come out and say, oh, I'm perfect? No, I'm not perfect. Everyone has their flaws. Miyazaki, he gets mad sometimes, but I can understand that. He talked about, like, I've seen some of the clips where he wasn't the happiest, and I can understand him, and just, this film helped me connect, helped me see Miyazaki for the person he is and how he's growing older, and he's eventually going to have to give the reins of the animation to Ghibli to help uphold his legacy and continue with the consistent animation. Or maybe the studio could even just fall, like this world in the game did in the movie, not the game. The studio could fall like the world did after the Grand Uncle's passing. Like, with Miyazaki's passing, I wouldn't be surprised if Ghibli shut down if after Miyazaki's passing, because what are they without him? Well, they can still make animation without him. They'll never be able to replicate him, but replicate his artistry, but they can still try their best, and that's what I like. They would either have to move on or fall like the world did in this movie. They could either fall like the world did in Boy and the Heron, or they could move on like Mahito did. And I love how this film there's so many things I could talk about with this movie. The artistry, the cinematography. This is not a live action film, but it still has great cinematography. Like, it's not shot through a camera, it's done through hand-drawn animation. But then again, the shots, the scenes, it's all done so well. And I love the concepts, I love every aspect of this film just works. You could watch it, and this film hit me harder than any other Ghibli film ever did. Its soundtrack, its themes, and I think really what I want to say is Miyazaki's next film, well, I'm hearing a lot of rumors that it might be Nausicaa too, and I think that would be the perfect Ghibli film to make a sequel to, because it's based on a already existing source material, the manga based by Miyazaki himself. Then the first movie only covered the first 2 books, so they could follow up with a sequel that covers the final 3 books, and I think that could work so well. In fact, I think Nausicaa 2, if it's the next Ghibli film, could be the best in Miyazaki's career, better than The Boy and the Heron. Like, it may not tell a personal story like this film does, but I think it would still be a grand, epic, just amazing film, and maybe the swan song for Miyazaki, unless he has one more film left in him, because I doubt he could put out more than 2 or 3 films before eventually having to retire, because it takes a long time for him to make these movies, and eventually he's going to be in his 90s, so I'm certain that he doesn't have a whole bunch of films left in him, and he's eventually going to have to retire because he's growing older and he can't work his entire life. Eventually he has to settle down in peace, because he deserves peace. He's worked so hard for a lot of his life, and eventually he's going to have to settle down and eventually pass away. That's find peace. In this film, Mahito has to find peace. Eventually, Miyazaki has to find peace. That's another thing that this film does. Like, I keep on connecting this film to kind of the life of Miyazaki and to us having to move on. Like, the soundtrack, the animation, the characters, the story, the themes, everything just works. And that's what makes this film the greatest movie that the studio has ever put out. Miyazaki's masterpiece. Spirited Away may be their most iconic film and still one of their best, but this film is their greatest masterpiece, and Miyazaki's magnum opus, and just the best animated movie we have ever gotten, period. We cannot, like, this film represents animation as an art form, whereas other studios such as Disney have forgotten what animation is. It's not a profitable thing that you can keep on making sequels upon sequels. No, it's something that you should be treating as art, something that you do for the sake of art, not money. And that's what Studio Ghibli understands so well. He does not hold back in his movies. They can feature great violence and strong themes. Unlike Disney, who try to play it safe, unlike how they used to. And that's why I think Studio Ghibli is the greatest animation studio of all time, and Miyazaki the greatest animator of all time. And this film displays everything that the studio and Miyazaki has been working on, and just the entire medium of animation as a whole has been leading up to. This represents the magic of animation, the magic of Ghibli, and the personal masterpiece of Miyazaki and his greatest film and the greatest animated movie of all time. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back in the next video. Prometheus out.